everyone, it's Megan with Imagine That and More, and I'm here with my Mad Masquerade quilt from Riley Blake that I finished up, and I'm hoping to put it in some shows this fall. So I got to get a binding on it, and I wanted to share with you a trick that I found to save you a little bit of money. So here's a view of the whole quilt. I love this cat in the center. I had so much fun. I actually decided to take a couple of the fabrics out and add wool. He's got wool pants on. A little bit of fun quilting. I don't know if you can see these awesome rhinestone buttons he's gotten on. So, a wool face. A little bit of three-dimensionality. So here's a block I added myself. The mummy. Love it. This is a great kit. We sell it in the store. I added the eyeball and also his little clock. So these projects are so fun because you can kind of just add whatever personality you have so that your quilt top ends up a little bit different than everybody else's. But anyway, back to what I wanted to talk to you about, which is the binding. So I've decided, since he's wearing a purple jacket, I wanted to use this purple polka dot grunge for the binding. But instead of just picking a 42-inch binding, it's a lot cheaper and less work to use 108. So as you can see, I have this very long 108-inch binding. So I'm going to show you some of the math just to back up this idea that I have. So here's the fun part, the math. Actually, quilting always surprised me because I enjoy the math more than I thought I would, because there's just enough math to keep me engaged, but not too much to scare me away. So hopefully this won't scare you either. So my quilt is 67 by 67, which isn't that big for a quilt. So you can imagine that anything that you do larger, the savings will multiply itself. So here, if I have a column for 42-inch width of fabric, if you buy your binding material and regular bolts, then it's going to be 42 inches. So the grunge, the cost of the grunge is $12.49 per yard for a 42-inch width of fabric. So my quilt is 67 by 67, so obviously I multiply that times 4, and I get 268 inches, running inches. And then I added 12 more inches, just so I have a whole lot of extra just in case. And that gave me 280 inches of binding that I needed. So since my material is 42 inches wide, I'm going to divide the 280 by 42, and it's going to tell me that I need 6.6 strips. So obviously we can't do 0.6 strips, so we're going to round it up to 7. And I do my binding at 2.5 inches square, so that means I need 16.6 inches of fabric. So I'm going to round that up because I can't go to the fabric store and buy 16.6. So I'm going to round that up to a half a yard. So my half a yard costs me $6.25 for my material. And I am going to need 7 strips of material, which means when I get done cutting this, I'm going to have 7 miters that I have to sew in order to attach that material. So I'm going to end up with a whole bunch of extra little triangles and some work. So here I am. I want to show you an alternative method that I prefer because I like doing less work and saving more fabric and saving more money. And this seems kind of counterintuitive because 108-inch backing fabric for the grunge is actually $19.99 per yard. So in your mind, you think you're spending more, but you're actually spending less per square inch. So I have my, again, 67-inch quilt, which means I have 280 inches. But this time I'm going to take my 280 inches and I'm going to divide it by 108-inch width of fabric. So now I only need 2.59 strips, which obviously I have to round up to 3. And my 3 strips need to be 2.5 inches wide, which gives me 7.5 inches of fabric. So now when I go into my quilt store, I'm going to round it up to 9 inches, which would be a 1/4 yard. And I'm going to ask them to cut me a 1/4 yard of fabric. That's $19.99 a yard. and now I only am paying $4.99. So before it was $6.25, but I've saved $1.26, and that's just on this little quilt. And I only have 2 strips to miter. Oops, I'm sorry, I apologize. I have 3 strips to miter, so only have 3 strips to sew together, which is actually 2 miters. So look at, I only have these 4 little extra triangles, and I've only had to miter 2, which is wonderful because sometimes when I miter, I do it wrong. And so even if I make mistakes on both of those 2, I only have to sew 4. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoy finding a new way of doing your bindings. I hope you'll have an awesome Halloween season as we're coming on to fall. And thanks for watching.